The Atlanta sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, relentless, heavy, and unforgiving. It was one of those late July afternoons where even the shade felt warm, and the air hung thick with humidity that clung to your skin like a second shirt. Most folks were inside, fans whirring, AC units humming, or maybe parked in front of an open fridge just to catch a breath of cool. But not him. He was walking. 17 years old, tall for his age, but still carrying that lean, unfinished look of a kid not quite grown into his frame. He moved with the quiet rhythm of someone used to long walks and longer days. His name wasn't important right then, not to the world anyway. But to his mama, his teachers, and the few friends who really knew him, he was the kind of young man who showed up. Showed up to his shift at the corner grocery store even when his feet ached. Showed up to school early to help clean the science lab in exchange for extra credit. Showed up at home with groceries and a smile, even when he was bone-tired. Today had been no different. He'd worked a double, stocking shelves, bagging groceries, running deliveries for elderly neighbors who couldn't make it out in the heat. By the time his shift ended at 4 p.m., his uniform shirt was soaked through, his sneakers scuffed and dusty, and his stomach growling like a stray dog. All he wanted was to get home, shower, maybe eat the leftover cornbread his mama had wrapped in foil, and crash on the couch for an hour before starting his homework. He lived in a neighborhood where streetlights flickered more than they shone and where every house told a story, some of struggle, some of hope, most of both. To get home from the store, he took a shortcut down Old Peachtree Road, a stretch that curved through quieter parts of the city, lined with tall pines and the occasional gated community that felt like it belonged to another planet. He didn't mind the walk. It gave him time to think, time to breathe, time to plan how he'd afford the SAT prep book he'd been eyeing at the library bookstore, $24.99, and he was 18 short. Then he saw it, up ahead, near the bend where the road dipped slightly before rising again. A car sat tilted on the shoulder, not just any car, a long black vehicle that gleamed even in the hazy afternoon light. It looked like something out of a movie, the kind of car you saw in commercials with soft piano music playing in the background. But now one of its back tires was flat, sagging pathetically against the asphalt, and a man in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks stood beside it, looking utterly lost. The man was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair neatly combed and expensive-looking loafers that definitely weren't made for changing tires. He held a phone to his ear, pacing in tight circles, his face tight with frustration. Every few seconds he'd glance at the car, then at the road, then back at his phone like he was waiting for a miracle to roll up in a tow truck. Most people would have kept walking. It wasn't their problem. Besides, in this city, you learned young not to get involved in things that didn't concern you, especially when the person involved looked like they had more money than sense. But something about the man's helplessness tugged at him. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with the trunk latch. Maybe it was the fact that no one else had stopped. Not the pickup that zoomed past, not the SUV that slowed but kept going. He hesitated for just a second, then walked over. "Need some help, sir?" The man turned, startled, like he hadn't even noticed anyone approaching. His eyes, sharp, blue, and tired, narrowed slightly, then softened as he took in the teenager standing before him. Worn backpack slung over one shoulder, faded jeans, a grocery store name tag still pinned crookedly to his chest. "You know how to change a tire?" the man asked, voice edged with skepticism but not unkindness. "I've changed a few," he replied simply. "My own car's older than your phone, I bet." A small smile flickered across the man's face. "That's probably true." He didn't wait for another invitation. He walked to the back of the car, popped the trunk with a button the man pointed to, and pulled out the spare tire and jack. The tools were shiny and unused. Clearly this car hadn't seen much roadside trouble. He knelt on the hot pavement, ignoring the sting of gravel through his jeans, and got to work. It wasn't glamorous. His hands got dirty. Sweat dripped from his brow into his eyes. The lug nuts were tight, and he had to put his whole weight into the wrench, grunting softly with effort. But he didn't complain. He'd done this before, on rainy nights in parking lots with flickering lights, once even in the snow when his cousin's car broke down after a holiday party. You learned to work with what you had. The man watched silently at first, arms crossed, then slowly uncrossed them and crouched down a few feet away, as if giving space but not wanting to miss a thing. "How'd you learn to do this?" he asked after a while. "My uncle taught me," he said, pausing to wipe his forehead with the back of his wrist. Said every man should know how to fix what's broken, especially if it's keeping him from getting where he needs to go. The man nodded slowly, like those words meant something deeper. Wise man, your uncle. He's gone now, he said quietly, turning back to the tire. But yeah, he was. There was a pause, comfortable, not awkward. Just two people sharing a moment under a blazing sun, connected by a flat tire and a little bit of decency. Within 20 minutes, the spare was on, the old tire stowed, and the jack tucked back into the trunk. He stood brushing dust off his knees and gave the car a final once-over. Should get you where you're going, he said. But don't drive too far on that spare. It's not meant for long trips. The man stared at him for a long moment, really looked at him, not with pity, not with condescension, but with something closer to respect. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black wallet. Let me pay you for your time, he said, already pulling out bills. No, sir, he said quickly, stepping back. I didn't do it for money, but you walked all this way. You're clearly on your way home. You helped a stranger. That's worth something. It's just what you do, he replied, shrugging. If I saw someone stuck, I'd hope someone would stop for me too. The man paused, the bills still in his hand. Then slowly he put them away. Instead, he reached into another pocket and pulled out a small, thick card, black with silver lettering. He held it out. Then take this. My name's Charles Whitmore. I own a tech company downtown. If you ever need anything at all, call me. A job, advice, a reference, even if it's just to talk. I mean it. He looked at the card like it might burn his fingers. He'd never held a business card before, let alone one that felt like it was made of metal. The name meant nothing to him. He didn't follow billionaires or stock markets, but the sincerity in the man's voice was real. I don't even have a fancy phone, he admitted, glancing at his cracked screen Android in his pocket. But I'll keep it. Charles, because that's what he decided to call him in his head, smiled. Good, and thank you. Seriously, you didn't have to stop. Yeah, well, he said, shifting his backpack. Guess I just did. Charles got into the car, started the engine, and rolled down the window. What's your name? He told him. Charles nodded, as if filing it away somewhere important. I won't forget this, he said. Then with a final nod, he drove off, the Rolls-Royce gliding smoothly down the road like it had never been stranded at all. He stood there for a minute, watching the car disappear around the bend. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the pavement. His feet ached. His shirt was stiff with dried sweat, but something inside him felt lighter, not because of the card in his pocket, though he tucked it carefully into his wallet, right behind his bus pass, but because he'd done the right thing, and it had mattered. He started walking again, the rhythm of his steps steady, his mind already drifting back to algebra homework and that SAT book. He didn't think much more about the encounter. It was just a moment, one of many in a long day, but sometimes, the smallest moments, the ones that feel ordinary as you're living them, are the ones that quietly reroute your whole life. He didn't know it yet, but that flat tire wasn't just a problem on the side of the road. It was a door, and he'd just held it open, for himself and for a man who'd been waiting years to walk through it. The walk home felt a little shorter that day. Maybe it was the breeze picking up. Maybe it was the golden light of evening softening the edges of the world. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first whisper of something new beginning. Something he couldn't see yet, but that was already unfolding, one honest act at a time. Weeks passed, and life settled back into its usual rhythm. School, work, helping his little sister with her math homework, fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen for the third time that month. The business card stayed tucked in his wallet, buried beneath bus tickets, a crumpled movie stub, and a faded photo of his uncle. He didn't think about it much. That afternoon on Old Peachtree Road felt like a dream now, something that happened to someone else in another life. Then everything changed. It started with a cough. Just a small one, the kind you brush off as allergies or dry air. But his mama's cough didn't go away. It got worse. She'd come home from her job at the nursing home exhausted, her voice hoarse, her eyes tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. One night, he found her sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight, bills spread out like a puzzle with no solution. The rent was due in 5 days. The electric bill had a red notice taped to it. And now, the letter from her workplace, folded neatly but the words cut deep. Position eliminated due to restructuring. She tried to hide it, smiled when he asked how work was, said she'd figure it out, but he knew better. He'd seen that look before, the same one his uncle wore the winter before he passed when the medical bills started piling up faster than the paychecks. He wanted to help, desperately. But what could he do? He was still in high school. His grocery store job paid just enough for his bus fare and a few groceries. He'd already sold his old gaming console, his sneakers, even the watch his grandma gave him for his 16th birthday. There wasn't much left to sell. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the streetlights flicker on one by one, his hand drifted to his wallet. Almost without thinking, he pulled out the black card. The silver letters still gleamed, untouched by time or worry. Charles Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Innovations. Below it, a phone number. He stared at it for a long time. Calling felt wrong, like he was taking advantage. The man had offered help, sure, but that was kindness, not a promise. And what would he even say? "Hey, remember me? The kid who changed your tire? My mom lost her job. Can you give me money?" It sounded desperate. And he wasn't that kind of person. But then he thought about his mama's hands, rough from years of cleaning other people's homes, now trembling as she counted out coins for laundry detergent. He thought about his sister, who'd stopped asking for new school supplies because she didn't want to add to the stress. He thought about the future he'd been quietly building in his head, college, engineering, a life where he could take care of them both, and how it was slipping further away with every unpaid bill. So he made a decision. Not to ask for a handout, but for a chance. The next morning before school, he borrowed his neighbor's landline. His own phone had died 2 days ago and he couldn't afford to fix it. His palms were sweaty as he dialed the number. Each ring felt like a heartbeat. He almost hung up twice. Then a calm, professional voice answered. "Whitmore Innovations. How may I assist you?" He cleared his throat. Hi, my name is..." "I met Mr. Whitmore a few weeks ago, on Old Peachtree Road. I helped him with a flat tire." There was a pause. Then, "One moment, please." Music played. Soft piano, the kind you hear in fancy waiting rooms. He held his breath, then a different voice, deeper, familiar. "Hello?" It was him. "Charles, Mr. Whitmore?" It's me." The kid from the road. Silence for a beat. Then warmth. "I remember you." "Of course I do. How are you?" The kindness in that voice almost broke him. He swallowed hard. "I'm okay. I'm doing all right, but I was wondering if your company ever hires high school students? For summer work? Or even part-time during the school year? I'm a hard worker. I've got good grades. I need to earn some money. For my family." He didn't mention the job loss, didn't say a word about the bills or the fear gnawing at his chest. He kept it simple, dignified. Charles was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon? There's a place near your neighborhood, Cedar and Vine, say 4 p.m.? He didn't have money for coffee, but he said yes. He walked to the cafe in his best shirt, the one he wore for job interviews, even though it was slightly too big and had a small stain near the collar he couldn't get out. He got there early and sat at a small table by the window, hands folded, trying not to look around like he didn't belong. Charles arrived right on time. No fancy car this time, just a modest sedan. He wore a simple button-down and slacks, no tie. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a teacher or a librarian. He bought 2 coffees, one black, one with cream and sugar, just how he'd remembered the kid liked it from their brief chat weeks ago. They talked. Not about money at first, about school, about what he wanted to study, about his uncle. Charles listened, really listened, nodding, asking questions, never interrupting. When he finally mentioned his mama losing her job, his voice barely above a whisper, Charles didn't flinch or offer empty sympathy. He just said, "That's tough. Real tough." Then he leaned forward. "I'm going to be honest with you. I don't hire high schoolers for filing or coffee runs. If you work with me, it'll be real work, challenging. You'll have to learn fast, speak up when you don't understand something, and show up even when you don't feel like it. But if you do, I'll make sure you're paid fairly, and I'll help you get into college." His heart pounded. "How?" "I'll cover your tuition, full ride. Books, housing, everything. On one condition." He braced himself. "You meet with me once a month. We talk about your classes, your goals, your struggles. And every summer, you intern at my company, not in the mailroom. In engineering, product design, whatever interests you, you earn your place, but I'll give you the tools to succeed." He couldn't speak. His eyes burned. He looked down at his hands, still calloused from stocking shelves, from changing tires, from holding his family together. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why would you do that for someone you barely know?" Charles stirred his coffee slowly. "Because someone once did it for me. I was your age, working 2 jobs, sleeping on a cousin's couch, convinced I'd never get out. An old man saw something in me I didn't see in myself. Gave me a shot. Changed everything." He looked up. "Now it's my turn." He didn't say yes right away. He asked questions. What if he failed a class? What if he couldn't keep up? What if he let him down? Charles smiled. "Then we figure it out together. But I don't think you will." They shook hands right there at the cafe table. 2 very different lives, linked by a flat tire and a shared belief that people deserve second chances. Third chances, as many as it takes. That night, he told his mama. She cried, not out of sadness, but relief so deep it shook her whole body. She held him tight and whispered, "Your uncle would be so proud of you." The next week he signed papers, scholarship agreements, internship contracts, confidentiality forms. It all felt surreal, like watching a movie where the hero gets a lucky break. But this wasn't luck. It was trust. And he wasn't about to waste it. He kept his job at the grocery store through the rest of the school year, not because he needed the money as much anymore, but because quitting felt wrong. He showed up early, stayed late, and treated every customer like family. Meanwhile, he started reading engineering textbooks Charles sent him, watching online lectures late into the night, and practicing coding on a second-hand laptop the company provided. People in his neighborhood noticed the change. Not in how he dressed or talked, he stayed the same, but in how he carried himself. There was a quiet confidence now, a sense of purpose. Kids at school asked if he'd won the lottery. He just smiled and said, "Nah, just got a little help." Charles kept his word. Every month, like clockwork, they met. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the office, once even at a community center where Charles was volunteering. They never just talked about work. They talked about life, about fear, about failure, about how success means nothing if you don't lift others as you climb. One afternoon, Charles handed him a key card. "Your summer starts Monday," he said. "You'll be working with the robotics team. They're building a prototype for a low-cost water purifier for rural communities. I told them you're sharp, curious, and not afraid to get your hands dirty." He nodded, heart racing. "I won't let you down." "I know," Charles said simply. "But don't do it for me. Do it for the kid you were, the one walking home in the heat wondering if things would ever get better. Prove to him that they can." That night he sat on his porch again, the same spot where he'd pulled out the business card weeks ago. The streetlights flickered. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. His little sister called from the window, "You coming in?" "It's getting cold." He smiled. "Yeah," he said. "I'm coming." But before he went inside, he looked up at the sky, clear, starry, full of possibility, and whispered, "Thank you." To no one and everyone at once. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There'd be days he felt out of place, moments he doubted himself, times he'd want to quit. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking it alone, and that made all the difference. College wasn't what he expected. He'd imagined it like the movies. Big libraries, friendly professors, late-night study sessions with friends laughing over pizza. But reality hit hard the first week. His dorm room was tiny, shared with a roommate who barely spoke to him and wore headphones like armor. The campus was beautiful, sure. Old brick buildings, trees older than his whole neighborhood. But it felt like stepping onto another planet. Everyone seemed to know the rules, the shortcuts, the unspoken language of privilege. He didn't. He showed up to orientation in his best thrift store blazer, notebook in hand, ready to learn. But when students casually mentioned summer internships in Switzerland or ski trips in Colorado, he stayed quiet. When a professor asked who'd taken AP calculus in high school, half the class raised their hands. He'd taught himself calculus from library books and YouTube videos. He didn't raise his hand. At first, he thought he could just work harder. And he did. He stayed up until 2 a.m. reviewing lecture notes. He rewatched every recorded class, He asked questions during office hours even when his voice shook. But no matter how much he studied, there was always someone who'd been prepped since middle school, who'd had tutors, who'd never worried about whether the lights would stay on at home. The worst part wasn't the academics, it was the feeling that he didn't belong. Like he was an imposter wearing someone else's future. He didn't tell Charles right away. Pride got in the way. He didn't want to seem ungrateful. After all, this was the chance of a lifetime. So he smiled through video calls, said everything was going great, and buried the doubt deep. But Charles saw through it. During their monthly meeting, this time at a quiet cafe near campus, Charles watched him pick at his sandwich. Eyes tired, shoulders slumped. "You're not sleeping," Charles said. Not as a question, but a fact. He shrugged. "Just a lot of work. Is it the coursework?" "A little. Or is it something else?" He looked out the window. A group of students walked by, laughing, backpacks slung over one shoulder like it was nothing. I don't know if I'm cut out for this," he admitted quietly. "Everyone here talks like they've been planning for this since they were kids. I feel like I'm playing catch-up every single day." Charles nodded slowly. "I felt the same way my first semester." He looked up, surprised. "You?" "Yeah. I went to a state school on a partial scholarship. My roommate had a trust fund and a car. I took the bus and ate ramen for a month straight. I failed my first chemistry exam. Thought I'd have to drop out." "What did you do?" I asked for help, real help. Not just from professors, from other students, counselors, anyone who'd listen. And I stopped comparing my Chapter 1 to someone else's Chapter 20. That night he went back to his dorm and did something he hadn't done before. He joined a study group. Not the one full of kids who'd gone to private schools, but a smaller one organized by the Campus Diversity Center. There he met others like him. First-gen students, kids from small towns, some from neighborhoods not so different from his own. They struggled with the same things. Feeling invisible, doubting their intelligence, wondering if they were smart enough. Slowly, things got better. He started speaking up in class. He found a professor who noticed his curiosity and invited him to help with a research project. He even made a real friend, a girl from Detroit who loved robotics and hated pretentious coffee shops. They'd study in the library, share snacks, and laugh about how weird college felt sometimes. But the real test came during his first summer, internship at Whitmore Innovations. He walked into the sleek downtown office building in a suit Charles had helped him pick out, heart pounding like a drum. The lobby was all glass and steel, with a receptionist who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. He gave his name and she smiled. "Ah, you're with the engineering team. Elevator B, 12th floor." The 12th floor was buzzing, people in crisp shirts typing furiously, whiteboards covered in equations, the hum of servers in the background. He was introduced to his team, 5 engineers, all in their late 20s or early 30s, all with degrees from top schools. They were polite but distant. One asked, "So you're the scholarship kid, right?" It wasn't meant to be cruel, but it stung. For the first week, he mostly watched, took notes, asked careful questions, tried not to mess up. But then, during a team meeting about a drone prototype, someone mentioned a battery overheating issue they couldn't solve. He remembered something from his uncle, how old car batteries would swell in summer if the vents were blocked. He hesitated, then spoke up. "What if it's not the battery itself, but airflow around it? Maybe the casing's trapping heat." Silence. Then the lead engineer frowned. "We checked thermal dispersion. But did you check it with the casing fully assembled? In real-world conditions?" They hadn't. The next day, they ran a new test with the drone fully built, sitting in a heated chamber. Sure enough, the battery spiked in temperature. They redesigned the casing with better vents and the problem vanished. After that, things changed. The team started asking for his input. They invited him to lunch. One engineer even said, "You've got good instincts. Ever think about product design?" He called Charles that night, voice buzzing with excitement. "I think I actually helped them." "I never doubted it," Charles said. "But I'm glad you're starting to believe it too, still." The world outside the office wasn't always kind. One afternoon, walking back from campus to his apartment near the internship site, he passed a group of guys in suits laughing loudly outside a bar. One of them nudged his friend and said, "Look at that. Must be one of Whitmore's charity cases." He kept walking, face burning, but the words stuck like glue. That night, he called his mama. Just to hear her voice. "How you holding up, baby?" she asked. "I'm okay," he said. "Just, sometimes I wonder if people see me for me, or just as the kid who got a handout." She was quiet for a moment. "Then let them think what they want. You know who you are. You earned every bit of this. And you're still the same boy who fixes things, helps neighbors, and checks on Ms. Lila down the street. That hasn't changed." She was right. So he kept showing up. Not just to prove himself to others, but to honor the version of himself who never gave up. He started tutoring high schoolers from his old neighborhood on weekends, using video calls to help them with math and science. He sent money home every month, even if it was just a little. And he never missed a mentorship session with Charles. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Their talks grew deeper. Charles shared stories about his own failures, business deals that collapsed, partnerships that turned sour, times he'd lost faith in himself. "Success isn't a straight line," he'd say. "It's a messy, crooked path with detours and flat tires." He laughed at that. One evening, during a walk through the city park, Charles turned to him and asked, "What do you want your legacy to be?" He hadn't thought about that before. "I don't know, maybe to build things that help people? Like clean water systems or affordable tech for schools?" "Good," Charles said. "But legacy isn't just what you build. It's who you lift up along the way." Those words stayed with him. By his second year of college, he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. He joined a student group designing solar-powered chargers for communities without reliable electricity. He presented their prototype at a national engineering fair and won second place. Professors started mentioning his name in recommendation letters. But the proudest moment came when his little sister got accepted to a good high school with a STEM program. She called him crying. "I want to be like you," she said. "No," he told her gently. "Be better." He visited home whenever he could. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. The same potholes, the same flickering streetlights, but he saw it differently now. Not as a place to escape from, but as a place worth fighting for. He started a small after-school program in the community center, teaching basic coding to kids aged 12 to 16. At first, only 3 showed up. By the end of the semester, there were 15. One shy boy with glasses told him, "I never thought I could do this. My dad says tech's not for people like us." He knelt down. "People like us built the first computers, you know. We just weren't always given credit." The boy's eyes lit up. That night, he texted Charles a photo of the group. "This is why I'm doing it." Charles replied instantly, "This is why I believed in you." The journey wasn't perfect. There were still days he felt out of place, moments he questioned if he was enough. But now, instead of hiding those feelings, he talked about them, with his study group, with his sister, with Charles. And each time he came out stronger. He was no longer just the kid who changed a tire. He was becoming the man who fixed systems, not just parts, who saw problems not as roadblocks, but as puzzles waiting to be solved. And through it all, he never forgot where he came from, or the quiet truth that had carried him this far. That kindness, when given freely, can echo louder than any fortune. It started with a headline. He was scrolling through his phone during a break between classes when he saw it. "Whitmore Innovations under fire. Internal emails suggest environmental violations." His stomach dropped like a stone. The article was short but sharp, just enough to sting. It quoted leaked emails between company executives discussing delays in installing proper filtration systems at a new manufacturing plant in Louisiana. The language was vague, but the implication was clear. Corners had been cut. Regulations ignored. Profits put before people. He read it 3 times, hoping it was a mistake. But the email signatures were real. The dates matched projects he'd even heard about during his summer internships. And at the top of the chain, Charles's name. For the first time since that day on Old Peachtree Road, doubt crept in like a cold draft under a door. He tried to call Charles right away, but got voicemail. He texted, "Did you see this article?" No reply for hours. That night he barely slept. Images flashed in his mind. His little sister drinking tap water, kids in his old neighborhood playing near empty lots where factories once dumped waste, his mama coughing in the kitchen. If the company he was tied to had hurt people like that, what did that make him? By morning, the story had exploded. News vans camped outside Whitmore Innovations headquarters. Social media lit up with outrage. Former interns posted about toxic culture. Environmental groups called for boycotts. Even his college engineering group. Chat buzzed with uneasy messages. "Dude, are you okay?" "That's your sponsor, right?" He didn't know how to answer. He skipped class, something he never did, and took the bus downtown. The Whitmore building, once gleaming and proud, now looked like a fortress under siege. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who walked in or out. Security guards stood stiffly at the doors. He used his intern badge to get in. The usual hum of innovation was gone. The office felt heavy, quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. Charles's assistant recognized him immediately. "He's been expecting you," she said softly, leading him to a private conference room on the top floor. Charles looked older, tired. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed. But when he saw him, he stood up and offered a handshake. Not the polished CEO gesture, but the same firm, human grip from that first coffee meeting. "Thank you for coming," Charles said. "What's going on?" he asked, voice tight. "Are those emails real?" Charles didn't dodge. Parts of them are. The full context is complicated. Complicated how? Charles walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "We were behind schedule on the Louisiana plant. Local officials kept changing requirements. Our team pushed back on installing the full filtration system because the temporary one met minimum legal standards. Not ideal, but not illegal. But the article says people got sick." "That's still being investigated," Charles said, turning. "And if it's true, if our decisions contributed to that, I'll take full responsibility." But the emails were taken out of order, edited. Someone inside the company leaked them with an agenda. He studied Charles's face, saw the regret, the weight, but not the guilt of a man who'd knowingly harmed others. "Still, minimum legal standards aren't good enough," he said quietly. "Not when people's health is on the line." Charles nodded slowly. "You're right." Silence stretched between them, not awkward but heavy with truth. Then he said something he hadn't planned to say. "I can't be part of a company that cuts corners like that. Even if it's legal, even if it's not your fault." Charles didn't argue. Didn't get defensive. Just looked at him and said, "What would you do instead?" The question surprised him. But an idea had been forming in his mind since he read the article, a spark he couldn't ignore. "What if we didn't just fix the problem," he said, leaning forward, "but turned it into something better? What if we launched a student-led initiative, engineers, environmental science majors, community reps, to design a low-cost, high-efficiency filtration system, one that could be used not just in our plants but in underserved communities everywhere? We could pilot it in Louisiana, partner with local groups, and make it open source so anyone can use it." Charles stared at him. Then a slow smile spread across his face. Not the polished CEO smile, but the one he'd seen that first day on the roadside. The real one. "That's brilliant," Charles said, "and it's exactly what we need. But it'll cost money, time, reputation." "Then we'll spend it," Charles said firmly. "Because you're right. Doing the bare minimum isn't leadership. It's laziness. And I didn't bring you into this company to watch me be lazy." Within a week, they announced the Urban Clean Tech Initiative. Charles held a press conference, not to deny the allegations, but to acknowledge the concerns and unveil the new project. He introduced him as the lead student architect. The media was skeptical at first. "PR stunt," one headline read. But he didn't care. He got to work. He assembled a team, 5 students from his university, 2 from historically black colleges, and 3 environmental activists from Louisiana. They met every evening, sometimes until midnight, sketching designs, running simulations, debating materials. He pushed them hard. "This isn't just a class project. Real people will use this. It has to work." They tested prototypes in campus labs, then in real-world conditions near rivers, in old industrial zones, even in his old neighborhood, where a small creek sometimes ran cloudy after heavy rain. One night, after a failed test, one of the students slumped in her chair. "What if we can't make it affordable and effective?" He thought of his uncle who used to say, "If it's worth doing right, even if it takes 10 tries." "We'll try 11, he said, and they did. 3 months later, they had a working model, a compact solar-powered filtration unit that could clean 500 gallons of water a day using recycled materials. It cost under $2,000 to build, less than a tenth of commercial systems. They installed the first one in a community center in Louisiana, right near the disputed plant. Local residents came to see it. An elderly woman filled a glass from the output pipe, drank it slowly, then smiled. "Tastes like rain," she said. That moment hit him harder than any award ever could. Back on campus, professors took notice. His senior thesis, based on the project, earned departmental honors. Companies started reaching out, not just to recruit him, but to license the design. But he insisted it stay open source. "This isn't about profit," he told them. "It's about access." Charles watched it all with quiet pride. During one of their monthly talks, he said, "You didn't just solve a problem. You changed how we think about responsibility." "I just asked the right question," he replied. "No," Charles said. "You had the courage to ask it when it was easier to stay quiet." The scandal didn't vanish overnight. Lawsuits dragged on, some investors pulled out, but something shifted in the public eye too. People saw a company willing to listen, to adapt, to put young voices, especially marginalized ones, at the table. Enrollment in Whitmore's internship program jumped. Applications from first-gen students tripled. He knew it wasn't perfect. Systems don't change overnight. But it was a start, and through it all he never lost sight of why it mattered. One weekend, he brought his little sister to the Louisiana site. She stood by the filtration unit, notebook in hand, asking engineers questions with the same sharp curiosity he remembered from her childhood. On the drive back, she said, "I want to build things that help people too." "You will," he said, "and I'll be right there cheering you on." That fall, as he prepared for graduation, he received an unexpected invitation to speak at a national youth leadership summit. The theme was ethics and innovation. He stood on stage in front of hundreds of students, his voice steady but his hands slightly trembling. He didn't talk about the scandal. He didn't defend Charles or the company. Instead, he told his story, the flat tire, the scholarship, the doubt, the choice to speak up. "Opportunity isn't just a gift," he said. "It's a responsibility. When someone lifts you up, you don't just climb. You reach back. You make sure the ladder holds for the next person." Afterward, dozens of students lined up to talk to him. One young man, barely 16, eyes wide, said, "I live near that plant in Louisiana. My little brother got sick last year. Thank you for not looking away." He hugged him. "Thank you for reminding me why this matters." That night, he called his mama. She'd watched the speech online. "Your uncle would have cried," she said, voice thick. "You're living the life he dreamed for you." He looked out his dorm window at the city lights. So much had changed. Yet so much remained the same. The same heart, the same values, the same belief that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is always worth it. He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was a bridge between worlds, between generations, between what was and what could be. And the best part? He was just getting started. Graduation day arrived with a soft spring rain. Gentle, steady, the kind that washes the world clean without drowning it. He stood in his cap and gown, the fabric slightly damp at the shoulders, and looked out over the sea of faces in the stadium. His mama was front row, beaming, tears already mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. His little sister sat beside her, holding a handmade sign that read "Proud of You" in bright pink letters, and near the back, leaning against a railing with a quiet smile, was Charles. No fancy seat, no VIP treatment, just there, like any other person who mattered. When they called his name, summa cum laude, mechanical engineering, he walked across the stage with his head high, not because he'd made it to the top, but because he'd carried everyone with him. After the ceremony, Charles pulled him aside near the old oak tree at the edge of campus, the same spot where they'd had their first real talk about failure and fear. "You did it," Charles said, voice thick with something deeper than pride. "We did it," he corrected gently. Charles chuckled, then handed him a small envelope. Inside was a keycard and a note. "Welcome to your new office. Urban Innovation Lab, lead director." He looked up, stunned. "You're serious?" "I've been serious since day one," Charles said. "This lab, it's yours. Your vision, your team, your rules. I'm stepping back. It's time." He didn't know what to say. All those late nights, the doubts, the moments he thought he'd never belong, they'd led here. Not just to a degree, but to a platform. a chance to build something that lasted. The Urban Innovation Lab wasn't just another department at Whitmore Innovations. It was born from the Water Filtration Project, but it grew into something bigger, a space where engineers, community organizers, and students from overlooked neighborhoods came together to design tech that served real people, not just shareholders. Solar-powered streetlights for blocks without reliable power, affordable air quality sensors for schools near highways, even a mobile app that helped families find free health clinics using real-time data. He hired his first team carefully, not just for skill, but for heart. He brought on the girl from Detroit who'd been his study partner, the environmental activist from Louisiana, even the shy boy from his after-school coding program, now in college himself. They worked out of a bright open space downtown, walls covered in sketches, prototypes on every table, the hum of 3D printers filling the air like a heartbeat. But the work wasn't just about gadgets. It was about dignity. One afternoon, he visited a neighborhood in East Atlanta where they'd installed their first batch of solar streetlights. Before the block had been dark by 7 p.m., kids couldn't play outside, elders were afraid to walk to the corner store. Now warm golden light pooled on the sidewalks and laughter floated through the air. An older man sitting on his porch waved him over. "You the one behind these lights?" He nodded. The man patted the space beside him. "Sit a minute." They talked about the man's grandson who wanted to be an engineer, about how the lights made his wife feel safe taking out the trash at night, about how nobody from big companies ever asked what they actually needed. "You didn't just give us light," the man said finally. "You gave us respect." That night he wrote it down in his journal. Tech isn't about circuits. It's about care. Months passed. The lab grew. Projects spread to other cities. He traveled, sometimes to speak, sometimes to listen, always returning with new ideas, new faces, new reasons to keep going. Charles, now mostly retired, visited the lab every few weeks. He never gave orders, just sat in the corner, sipped coffee, and watched. Once he said, "You've built something I never could have imagined." "I had your trust," he replied. That's where it started. But the true test of how far he'd come came not in a boardroom or a lab, but on a quiet road, eerily familiar. He was driving home late one evening after a long day at the lab. Rain had returned, light but steady, blurring the streetlights into halos. As he rounded a bend near Old Peachtree Road, the very stretch where it all began, he saw a car pulled over on the shoulder. A young kid, no older than 16, stood beside it, staring helplessly at a flat tire. His breath caught. He slowed, then pulled over without thinking. The kid looked up. Wary at first, this was still a city where strangers didn't always stop. But when he rolled down his window and said, "Need a hand?" the tension in the boy's shoulders eased. He got out, grabbed his own tire kit from the trunk, he always kept one just in case, and walked over. The rain misted his glasses, but he didn't mind. "First time changing one?" he asked as he knelt. "Yeah," the kid admitted. "My cousin showed me once, but I forgot the order." "No worries," he said, handing him the wrench. "Hold this. I'll talk you through it." For the next 20 minutes, he didn't do it for him. He guided him, showed him how to loosen the lug nuts, how to position the jack, how to tighten without stripping the threads. The kid's hands were shaky at first, but grew steadier with each step. When the spare was on and the tools were packed away, the kid wiped his hands on his jeans and grinned. "Thanks, man. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Just remember, when you see someone stuck, stop. Even if it's just to ask if they're okay." The kid nodded, serious now. "I will." Then on impulse, he reached into his wallet. Not for money, but for a card. Plain white this time, with just his name, title, and a phone number. "If you ever want to learn more about engineering, or need advice on school, call me. No fancy promises. Just a conversation." The kid took it like it was something precious. "You mean it?" "I do." As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The kid was still standing there, card in hand, looking at it like it held a secret, and maybe it did. A few weeks later, his phone rang. A quiet voice on the other end. "Hi. It's the kid from the tire. I was wondering, do you ever take on summer interns?" He smiled. "Tell me your name." Later that evening, he met Charles for coffee. Same cafe, same table by the window. He told him about the kid, about the call, about how he'd invited him to tour the lab next week. Charles listened, stirring his coffee slowly. Then he said, "So it's your turn now." "It always was," he replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching people pass on the sidewalk. Students, workers, families, dreamers. Each one carrying their own story, their own flat tires, their own quiet hopes. "You know," Charles said finally, "I used to think success was about building something that lasted forever. A company, a legacy, a name in history books. And now I think it's about moments. Like that one on the roadside. Like the one today. Passing on what you've been given, not as a debt but as a gift," he nodded. Because he understood now. This wasn't just his story. It was a chain. Each link forged by kindness, trust, and the courage to believe in someone before they believe in themselves. That weekend, he spoke at a youth summit in his old neighborhood. The gymnasium was packed, not with executives or investors, but with kids from the blocks he knew by heart. He didn't talk about billion-dollar deals or fancy titles. He talked about fear, about showing up even when you're scared, about how helping one person can ripple out farther than you ever imagine. Afterward, a group of teenagers surrounded him, asking questions about internships, college apps, how to start a project with no money. He gave them his time, his number, his full attention. One girl, maybe 14, with braids and bright eyes, asked, "Did you ever think you'd be here when you were my age?" He thought for a moment. "No," he said honestly, "but I always hoped someone would see me and give me a chance to try." She smiled. "Well, I see you." And in that moment, he knew the circle was complete. Life wasn't a straight road. It was full of flats, detours, storms, and unexpected stops. But if you kept your heart open, if you were willing to kneel in the rain and help a stranger change a tire, you might just find that the journey itself was the destination. Back at the lab the next Monday, he pinned a new quote on the wall above his desk, handwritten. Simple, true. Build things that matter. Lift people as you rise. And every morning when he walked in, he saw it, and remembered not just where he'd been, but why he was here. Not for fame. Not for fortune, but for the kid on the roadside, for his mama's tired hands, for the uncle who taught him to fix what's broken, for the billionaire who saw more than a flat tire, and for every young person still waiting for someone to stop, look them in the eye, and say, "Need some help?" Because that's where change really begins, not in boardrooms, but in ordinary moments of extraordinary kindness. And as long as he kept showing up for those moments, the work would never be done, and that was exactly how he wanted it.